So, yeah, Sylvia, first of all, thanks for taking the time. And it's exciting that we are seeing each other and that the world is behind you.
This is such a treat. This is magic.
So,
Not as good as being in the same room with you, but I'll take it.
yeah, we can cook. We can actually cook for each other's, and I can like serve you food through the screen.
Here's my coffee. Would you like some coffee?
Oh yeah, please, please, thanks.
Yeah. I'll take a sip first.
Yeah.
Sharing.
I love it. I think the first would be great to get an introduction from you. Something like, it's me, Sylvia, and what are you doing? And where are you right now? And what is happening?
Sylvia Earle here. I'm actually in Oakland, California, enjoying Earth Day on dry land. Actually, if I had my choice, I'd be out there in the blue, and I'd be with you, Cyrill. We really need to go splash around and salute the ocean, because although this is Earth Day that we're celebrating, every day is Earth Day, and every day is Ocean Day. Earth, after all, is mostly ocean. And as you know, I've spent thousands of hours out there in the ocean, and I hope there'll be thousands more to come, with little submarines as well as just out there snorkeling and diving to get to know the ocean from the inside out. The image that is behind me, we're celebrating 50 years of Earth Day. We're also celebrating 50 years of seeing ourselves from high in the sky. What a transformative view that is.
The blue marble.
It just, I think, a bit like what's happening to us now with the coronavirus. We're vulnerable. We're not, we like to think we're in charge of what goes on, we humans. But then we get a wake-up call, that image of Earth from space against the backdrop of the infinity of a very hostile, inhospitable universe. Beautiful.
Do you remember the moment when you first saw that first image from Earth?
I remember that, and I remember seeing Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong put their first footprints on the moon. And I remember just about a year ago getting to meet Bill Anders, the astronaut who took that Earthrise image that so really shocked and transformed and inspired us. Yes, yes, I do. It was
like, what was the moment when you saw the planet?
It makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Still does, I mean, as a kid, like most kids, even today, schoolrooms have a globe, but now we have Google Earth. And we have other means of seeing ourselves, but mostly the smartest people who ever lived, including Einstein, never got to see our home from high in the sky. We are privileged, and so are the kids coming along. They know what the most informed, intelligent, wise people who lived before the middle of the 20th century, and here we are well into the 21st, that, the bad news is we can see the terrible mistakes we have made. Maybe that's the good news, that we can see what the problems are. If the really bad news is if we didn't know what's now,
we would be blind. But now there's actually no reason not to act. We got it all in front of us, and
there's no excuse. Now we know.
Yeah,
we know what to do. I mean, we have evidence, and actually, even going back 50 years, there were some who said, we're beginning to see the air change. In 1970 was a time that triggered bringing new laws into place in this country and around the world. And clean air, clean water, the Environmental Protection Agency that's now threatened, and the Endangered Species Act, which in itself is now endangered, the National Marine Sanctuary Program, so many things, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Act, all those things came by in a very few years, starting about 50 years ago. And it was during the Nixon administration, and Nixon is not loved for many reasons, but he certainly seemed to have a focus, and the people around him were on board and implemented the changes in the laws that have really made such a difference, not just in this country, but inspired people around the world, governments around the world. But we have national parks that scaled up, and other ways of protecting the natural systems, overarching laws about migratory birds. We need to do a lot more about migratory fish and other creatures. It was a while before whales were protected from commercial exploitation, not until 1986. So, and we're still killing whales indirectly by all the plastics we're putting in the ocean, and by all the things, krill and small fish and big fish that we're taking out of the ocean.
All the life we take.
Yes, changing not just the physical elements, the reduction in wildlife in the ocean, but it's changing the chemistry of the ocean too, the very basic carbon cycle, because we're taking so much out and breaking the links that, like a great network of reactions. And here's the thing, the current pandemic has...
That would be my next question. How would you relate that to COVID-19, the situation we're in right now?
COVID-19 is one virus, one kind out of, we don't know how many, but for every bacterium that exists, I'm told there may be as many as 10 variations on the theme of viruses, because not only are they predators on bacteria of this great microbial world that shapes the chemistry and reality of our existence, they're sometimes symbionts, and we have them in us too. We know we have bacteria, but we didn't know that when I was a child. It never occurred to me that I had a microbiome. But
made of creatures, all these things that kind of live in you and make you.
Yes, make digestion possible, make me healthy. You know, without them, I couldn't exist. And it includes a lot of viruses as well as a lot of bacteria. The microbiome is a combination. And so here's this one that is host specific, likes humans. Well, apparently it migrated from perhaps bats, pangolins, whatever it is, but we're the ones who caused the distress, put ourselves in harm's way.
Jump over from a species that could deal with it to us who can't deal with it.
Right. And if we make peace with nature, if we have a stable world where wild places are common, not rare. Right now, we have so demolished forests, wetlands, deserts, and the ocean. These are the elements that make us safe. And when we tear them apart, and when we gather, whether it's a fish market or a market that is selling other forms of wildlife, these are distressed animals. And that's where we're likely to find diseased animals that in turn can leap to us.
They're not treated as beings. They're not treated as creatures. They're just treated as product, and they're being cramped together. It's a very inhumane way of dealing with life. And in a way, it's logical that there is something extreme happening out of that, right?
Right. it's, they're not out to get us. They're just doing what they do. We are food for these little organ or almost organisms. They're not really alive. Viruses, unlike bacteria, are alive. They can reproduce themselves. But one of the key elements of being alive is you have to reproduce yourself, be able to do that. And viruses need a host. They're just waiting for the opportunity to invade a host, and then they actually draw on the ingredients from usually bacteria, but humans are another host. They're predators on us. They're really tiny predators. We worry about sharks and things, but we need
Very
to.
efficient predators, and they're causing a situation that we wouldn't cause with the environmental movement so far. They shut down economy globally. And is there something about the situation, the current situation, that really surprises you, where you feel like you couldn't have imagined that?
No, I have imagined it. I've said for a long time, we just set the table, and that we need to behave ourselves because we're just acting as if we can do anything to the natural world that we wish, but just stand by. And I'm not alone in this. There's some people whose specialty is looking at diseases, and they say, it's going to happen. It will happen again, unless we really listen up, learn from this, and emerge from this devastating circumstance armed with not just knowledge, because the knowledge has been there. Larry Brilliant is a brilliant epidemiologist who is, well, had a key role in literally exterminating smallpox. But smallpox, another virus, was a scourge of humanity for thousands of years. It's only when we even discovered the existence of viruses, which wasn't that long ago, and realize how they behave and what they are and what to do to cope with it, that he helped lead this global initiative that resulted in where we are now, where we're safe. We have a way to vaccination. As little kids, we get vaccinations now. Most do, and most don't. I mean, you'd say you don't have to because you're not exposed to smallpox anymore because it's gone. But there are gazillions of other opportunities out there in the microbial world to morph into something where we're lunch. Just a piece of meat.
Yummy lunch. Yeah. So
because we're so connected, Cyrill, go back.
I did like that.
Yeah, I mean, even with the smallpox that was global, but it took a while for it to become that way. I mean, the Hawaiian Islands were safe from smallpox until Europeans arrived, bringing not just smallpox, but a host of other ills that the people, the native Hawaiians, had not experienced before contact with Europeans. Or North America, the Native Americans, when Europeans first arrived, with diseases that had come to accommodate and build up resistance, but the Native Americans did not. So, but now we are globally connected and in ways that, well, it's unprecedented. Of course, as you know, I'm a frequent flyer to get to the places that I have felt compelled to go to, but I've been aware every time I get on an airplane that I'm breathing air, sharing the microbes with everybody else who's on board.
The spawn point of virus infection.
That's true. Maybe I built up a certain immunity as a consequence of.
You know them all. You had them all. They're all in you.
But you can't build up immunity to everything. They're always, and because they do have like bacteria and viruses, part of their success is that they can change, they can morph and adapt. So it's part of why we, again, are vulnerable. But the best hope for us is making peace with nature. Try to keep these systems stable, intact, respect the trees, respect the pangolins, respect the insects. We have singled out a few that do cause us problems, and then we nuke them all. We lose this wonderful diversity of insect life that we need. Without insects, we couldn't survive. I know it seems like a big, bold statement, but
it's a fragile system where everybody has a role to create that chemistry that allows us to be here.
right. I could start taking little pieces out of my computer and all of a sudden it wouldn't work. Really.
So, Sylvia, you are an explorer. You went to extreme places and you went there in little confined little containers, submarines or suits. And people are not so good right now dealing with confinement. They feel anxious. They are missing other people and they're actually scared. And I wonder, what are you thinking about fear? I mean, how do you deal with fear?
Well, I'm acutely aware that humans are social creatures. It is part of who we are, what we are. It's part of why we are successful as we are. We learn things, we pass it along. We have our families, our communities. We are, you know, we love one another basically. And yes, we do sometimes fight, but it's all a part of this cultural appreciation of one another. And so one thing that I really came to appreciate, living in a bubble, if you will, confined underwater, could not go to the surface, there with 4 teammates for 2 weeks. And this was part of a NASA, Navy, Department of Interior study to see how people behaved in confinement. And because we knew there was an endpoint, we went in, we were there confined, and just like astronauts, you know, you'll come back home in due course, at least you hope you will. But what you begin to see more clearly is what you're dependent on, air. You know, here in this room, I kind of take the air here and outside, this envelope of atmosphere that wraps itself around the planet. I take it for granted. At least I don't really, but I don't think about it that often. But when you are contained in an underwater laboratory, or if you're in a submarine, a little bubble, you are looking at the oxygen level all the time and the CO2 level all the time, checking it out. Is the CO2 getting too high? So I have to check out my scrubber to make sure that it's working. Is oxygen getting too high? Because too much oxygen isn't good for us either. And it's very inflammable. The tiniest little spark in a high oxygen atmosphere bursts into flames. So you need enough oxygen, but not too much. We need some carbon dioxide to power photosynthesis, but not too much. Water, we need water. And you're certainly aware of that when you're in a little submarine. You're surrounded by water, but you can't get to it. And it's salty. So you have to take your water supply along with you, your air supply along with you, your food supply. Where's food come from? So when coming back, looking at Earth, there's our bubble. That's our life support system. That's where the air is. That's where the water is. And fortunately, of course, water comes up from the ocean into clouds and falls back onto land and sea. So we have snow and ice and lakes and rivers and streams, water to drink, all the things that we rely on the natural systems and we think of it as free. But I think one of the outcomes that may arise from this pandemic is a wake-up call that we are vulnerable. We thought we were safe, we're not. We have to be conscious, mindful of what we what we do and also what we don't do. We
And
have to be proactive about taking care of nature.
and we probably get rid of that arrogance that we are actually able to control, to master nature, and that we are actually improving nature. I think that was the thought of the last decades, that people felt like, oh, we got it all under control. Nature can be bent however we want it. And that now this little thing is the opposite.
Right. It's like Mother Nature reminding us the laws of nature are the highest priority. You can't fiddle with them. You can't revoke them. You got to understand them and realize the nature of the carbon cycle, the oxygen cycle. We should, when we're little kids, learn about the biogeochemical cycles that make Earth special in the universe. That's our home. And it's not that difficult. We learn our numbers, we learn language. We need to learn the language of nature. And it can be a lifetime enterprise because there's so much out there to learn, but you can learn the basics very quickly. And a 5-year-old can do it. In fact, 5-year-olds are doing it.
Faster than we are.
Because the knowledge is there. And because some of the people who are in high positions of power missed out on that when they were kids, it's not second nature to them. You know, numbers are second nature. Language, yeah, it's
far away. Yeah.
But they have to learn it and incorporate it into our everyday thinking, like the headline, take care of the natural world. It takes care of everything, business, health, security. If we fail to do that, nothing else is going to matter.
Do you think that, and you touched on it, but do you think that the crisis has a long-lasting effect on us and change the way we behave and we deal with nature towards more collaboration and respect and peace, as you mentioned it? Or is it just like this little nightmare that we're gonna wake up from it and, oh, there was a phase in time, it was a bad time, we couldn't go out to have coffee and meet friends. How high do you see the chances that it has really a substantial effect on us, men, things?
I think there have been enough for the first time, enough of these first time things. For the first time, oil negative in value, a barrel of oil.
You get paid if you're taking oil.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's with this? I mean, we're an oil-based economy, right? I mean, the way we factor the global economy, it goes back to things that we are now rethinking. I hope, and it is an optimistic hope, that we will think about nature differently and account for nature in ways that we haven't before. And that we will take seriously our vulnerability. And maybe people will want to know, well, what are viruses anyway? And realize that most of them are either neutral or we really need them. But you got to be careful about turning loose the monsters. And
it can happen easily right now because we're changing through climate change, through overfishing, through all these toxic materials that we're putting out there. We're changing the chemistry in a rapid speed. And
that's right, the chemistry of Earth.
The roulette game, in a way.
Because the little guys, the microbes that make Earth hospitable for us and can adapt quickly to changing circumstances, we don't know what kind of soup we are putting out there and who will be the winners and who will be the losers among the microbes. We want the winners to be those that have put us where we are in a habitable planet. But we've changed the temperature, changed the carbon cycle, changed the nitrogen cycle. We're changing the chemistry that is good news for little creatures who have been waiting their turn until the current situation is in their favor. And
we're inviting them in. We're inviting species in that we don't even have a clue what they do with us.
Correct. That's really the big picture issue, that if I lose sleep, that's what I lose sleep about, that we have changed the chemistry in ways that could not be favorable to the systems that keep us safe. It may take a while, or it could happen quickly. That's It's not a new worry. These are things that, and again, I'm not just one voice. I learn these things from my colleagues who have expressed these concerns. When you alter the nature of nature, we didn't think we could do that, but we have. Alter the nature of nature by looking at the diversity of life. That's our stability system. When you've got a rich diversity, if you lose a species, there may be others that can take their place. But if you lose enough of the basic elements, especially keystone species, such as krill in Antarctica, keystone, if you take out the krill, look at all the creatures that are directly tied to krill. And we are doing exactly the perverse thing, going out there with big ships, factory ships, taking thousands of tons of these critical little shrimp-like creatures that we just treat as if they're goods. And they have no value until we kill them, take them, market them. But we've left a space in the ocean that there isn't somebody else coming along to fill that space.
There
The
is
penguins
big
are,
emptiness. There's a void.
are starving, and we're seeing it when we take all the little fish, and whether it's herring or capelin or the other small fish that we, and squid likewise. Those are basic species that hold whole ecosystems in place, and there's nothing in the natural cycle of things that has humans as predators on these creatures, on squid. I mean, go back a few thousand years, yes, humans were taking herring and they were taking squid, but not on the scale that we're doing it today. And never have we taken krill until about the 1980s, when we could get to Antarctica and when ships could safely travel long distances, fueled with fossil fuels that could travel quickly from one place to another, with satellites that can give us navigation, so that a lot of things have come into place.
Locate pretty much all life, right? There's no hiding ground anymore.
Right. Anyway, I mean, I can get really depressed, but I refuse to, because
what keeps up the big hope? Where do you take your energy from? Where do you think like this can actually turn around? This can stay a blue marble. Oh, I think I lost. Did you hear me?
Yeah. No. It's all about knowing, Cyrill. Once you know, you're armed with superpower, and we have superpower. We can see it. We can calculate, here's where we were, here's where we are, and armed with the technology that now exists in the way that we're connected. In some ways, you say 7 billion, almost 8 billion people. That's a lot of mouths, a lot of things that have to be provided from the natural world. But the good news is we've got 7 going on 8 billion minds.
Like super processors sitting around.
To connect and say, look, all right, you guys, men and women, kids, everybody.
So you believe in intelligence. You believe that mankind is not stupid enough to destroy this planet and to destroy the future. You really believe that we're going to invent ourselves out and create options and alternatives.
We have a choice. It's not that we do not know. A lot of people don't know, even now. The knowledge is there, but they refuse to tap into it.
And to turn it into action and to follow it in a logical way.
Right. So it's a matter of getting to, I suppose, a critical mass. Are there enough people who really get it, who understand, and who are influential, and are able to do what it takes to get to that tipping point in the positive direction. We're aiming for a tipping point in the negative way. Look at what we're doing to the climate. I think one positive outcome that could arise from the current pandemic is that we can see our impact on climate, and the air is clearer because we aren't traveling as much, and some of the factors that cause air pollution are being shut down. Hit the pause button. I love it that the canals in Venice are clear. You can see the bottom, you can see fish.
There's a comparison, a real comparison between like before and after.
Right. So the point is that we have tangible evidence in a matter of a few weeks that show how we impact nature. Some people have been under the impression that it doesn't matter what we do, climate change will happen no matter what. It's inevitable. Or it's not humans who are causing this. These are just the natural cycles that over long periods of time, and there's nothing we can do. Well, clearly there's something we can do. We have evidence. And it's not just in learned societies and scientific papers, and no, people everywhere are seeing the images.
And you can witness it with your own ears, with your own nose. You actually see it when you're stepping out of the door. It has a total difference.
And the fact that orcas are coming in closer to shore up around Seattle because the ship traffic is reduced. Noise is another issue. We've just so mindlessly put noise into the ocean, put carbon dioxide, acidification of the ocean, all the plastic junk in the ocean, thinking, oh, it's just the way things are. Well, they don't have to be that way. You know it, I know it. If we get enough people to understand it, this will be a terrible thing, but some good can come out of it, the current pandemic.
And the planet is, I mean, nature is quite resilient, right? I mean, it's growing fast. It's like spreading, it's recovering when we leave life in peace in the waters or out there in the woods.
One way or the other, life will go on with us or without us. I mean, that's the other reality. Throughout most of the history of the world, humans did not exist. We are newcomers. And we can, through our own actions, we're seeing it happen right now. We could unleash disasters, and climate change is certainly the big headline here. But diseases, another big headline. And this is not
also connected probably in the future, because with like the frost, with like the ice melting, we release actually species that shouldn't belong anymore into this time.
That's correct. And we're also the feedback mechanisms that as the ice melts, the methane that's contained in the tundra in the Arctic and also in the deep sea, where methane is held in place as methane ice. Gas hydrates, they're known as, it's methane ice held in place with pressure, and because in the deep sea it's cold. But if the ocean warms, and it is warming, and we're seeing some evidence that there is greater release of methane in some coastal areas, but we don't really have a good enough baseline going back far enough to know where globally all of these methane releases were taking place. But now we have the capacity to monitor that.
From space, satellites, and all kind of instruments. Right?
Yeah, even though it's not visible, and that's one of the problems. The oil and gas industry has been responsible for releasing massive amounts of methane in the course of doing their business that they didn't have to if they were required to cap it. But because it's invisible, people don't see it. And so it's just been happening. But we can detect it. There are ways to detect methane to make it visible, if you will. And that too, it's happening. We're beginning to see a reaction as armed with knowledge. Once we know, then we have the power. And I do think of how kids of today, including you, you're a big kid, the superpower of being able to communicate in ways that uh, I think that art is one of the powerful new tools for communicating what we need to know about
Translate knowledge.
where we are. Yes. And it's through films, it's through music, it's through poetry, it's through whatever it is that can get into the minds and hearts of people to inspire them to say, yeah, okay, I've known this all along. I've got the facts, but I'm not doing anything. But sometimes if you take those facts and you present them in a way that you can make it personal, which is what you can do with a good story.
Take the abstract out and make it like account for an individual.
Right. And I think there's more of that happening too, the connection between science, art, and action, if you will.
And everybody can do something right now. I mean, everybody is being heard with that enormous connectivity. Even like small little change in behavior are being noticed. And if people like change drastically, then industry will follow. And end of the day, it is the industry that is like creating all these problems, and it's the consumer who's like feeding into that, and the creator that actually invents all these things. So it's just a question of
it's the marketplace. It's what we think of as the value, but you know, the value of a healthy forest. It's not to be measured in board feet of lumber. It has a value that transcends products. Fish have a value alive that transcends the value of
the refrigerator. It's like the lowest way of treating that life.
Right. So that's part of the challenge that we now face to get people to put an honest value on nature. Fish are not free, but we treat them that way. We just have to go out and get them. But until they're dead, until they're caught, they have a zero accounting base. That's not right. It's as if you have a bank account that you keep drawing down the assets, and then suddenly there aren't any anymore. And we're down to a fraction of the wildlife in the ocean that existed when I was a child, because we haven't accounted for the loss. All we do when we say our gross national product, it's based on a false accounting.
And we assume endless supply, and we don't see life on eye level. We still are in this old mindset that everything else that is not human needs to be killed and eaten. And even if we like it, then we just chop it up and bring it home.
Right. I have someone to say hello here.
Yes. Hey.
A little panther. Anyway.
So I feel it's really about learning to collaborate with nature and to understand that we can't do this alone.
Respect. We need to respect one another. We need to respect the natural world, to treat the natural world as if our lives depend on it, because clearly they do. So if we can just get that through our, and make it a part of our culture, our everyday value system, plenty of reason for hope. I see people who are doing this, but it needs to be like language. The language of survival means respecting where air comes from, respecting where water comes from, respecting
where the cat is coming from,
our space. Sorry.
So if it's just a moment every day where we just more or less kind of go back to that origin of our life and show our gratitude. I mean, it could be 10 minutes. So Earth Day should be probably split into 10 minutes every day.
24/7.
That's you and me.
every breath you take. Thank you. Thank you, world. I'm so glad that this is not Mars or Jupiter. It's it's home. It's home. And we are so lucky that we know what we now know, because that makes us, that's cause for hope. You ask what gives me hope, it's knowledge. And as people take to heart who we are, where we've come from, where we could be, if we really understand our place in the greater scheme of things, there's plenty of reason to be optimistic and look forward to the next 50 years.
Sylvia, what is the one thing you would like everybody on this planet to see? Back then it was a picture of the planet. What could be the next picture, the next experience that could change the way we are looking at our home, this blue marble we are living on?
Well, we've had that catalyzing view of Earth from high above. I think everyone needs to be deep within the ocean and to take a journey. It took a journey from the Earth to go high in the sky, to start at sea level and to go down into the depths of the ocean. Light penetrates, maybe 1,000 feet, 300 meters or so. Beyond that, it's dark, except for the flash and sparkle and glow of bioluminescent creatures that provide some illumination. It's like falling into a galaxy. It's a living ocean. People need to know that the ocean keeps us alive. So from high in the sky, you can see the world is blue. If you get deep in the ocean, actually it's dark and it's cold.
Again.
And you go through the blue zone where light penetrates, and then it's dark. And the deeper you go, the higher the pressure, but it's always alive. And because people haven't seen it, they haven't embraced it, they don't care about it. They don't know that they need to care. So the one place I would like to take people, the image I would like to impress on people is the living ocean. Just start at the top and descend down into the great depths, and then come back, and then enjoy every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, and show some respect for life in the ocean and for the existence of all of that water that, of course, is vital to life itself.
So we just need to get 7.7 billion people down there, and we can start with 1% and then work our way up.
Let's get little submarines, Cyrill, and
Hundreds.
Bring people along. Let's go diving.
That's what we have to do.
Onward and downward and upward.
Sylvia, I'm grateful. I'm speaking, I think, for everybody who's watching this. Very, very grateful for you being still on this mission your whole life, still believing, still having hope after all the destruction you saw, all the conversations you had, of which I'm sure only a small percentage led to success. But still, you left an impression with all of them. I'm very, very certain and sure. And yeah, thank you. And happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day to you. And remember, we've got a date.
We do.
Deep.
Deep date. Very deep date.